I didn't even know ABC of Alph Bay of Urdu. So they used to give dictation, which I used to write in Roman English. I remember Maharaja Patiala's children, boys coming in Rolls Royce. I mean, if anybody came in a vehicle other than a Tonga, they were dropped outside.
Babar Sahib, you made the School of Education at LUMS. Before that, you made LUMS. Before that, you made the Ali Institute. So it's a lifelong dedication to the field of education. It's only appropriate that the world gets to know about your education and your education as a young schoolboy. So I'm going to ask you some questions about your time before you were at HSN, the school where you did your early years. So tell us about what you remember of Sacred Heart. What is your earliest memory there?
We, lived in an area called Rattigan Road, which was very close to Central Model School. It's nursery school in its immediate neighborhood. One of my sisters, I had 5 sisters, and the eldest one got married about the year that I was born. And my second sister started education at Sacred Heart School. Then when my third and my fourth and fifth sisters arrived, they had all moved to Queen Mary College. But Sacred Heart School had left a very good impression on my sister Fakhra, who's Fakhr Imam's mother. And she suggested to my mother that I should go to Sacred Heart School, to their nursery. And the only thing I remember is my father was always traveling. So one of his managers walked me from Rattigan Road to Sacred Heart School, which was perhaps about a mile away. And nobody ever thought of getting into a Tonga. That was the only vehicle that was available at that time. So they said, let's walk. So I took me by the finger and I went to the school. And the only thing I remember is I cried very, vociferously and howling that I didn't want to be away from home. That's the first thing I remember of Sacred Heart School. But then I went there next time. I was quite at home with boys, primarily boys of my age. And of course, it was co-education. Actually, it was a girls' school which allowed boys to come in the early years. So I remember the first 2 or 3 years that I was there. I thoroughly sort of got adjusted to whatever was to be learnt. Everything was in English. And of the things I remember is we were all given a cup of milk to drink. And I can still recall, I was telling Sister Martin the other day, I can still recall the horrible taste of that milk. It was lukewarm, and it was poured out of a huge ceramic dish into small cups, and we were made to drink that. It was mandatory. And it's, now to think back on it, they were very keen that the nutrition of the youngsters should be well balanced. We were given a biscuit, of course, which we loved, but the milk we hated. But that was a part of it. Then there was a lot of emphasis on English handwriting. And so I perhaps did fairly well in the classes. There were girls from girls from the sort of top echelon of Lahore society at that time. I remember the girls that were in my class were from Myra Brothers. They had the Ford agency, and I still remember them. And as a young boy, I took fancy to them, and I was very friendly. But it was a very friendly environment. The other thing I remember is at the time of the break, we used to all rush to the gate to pick up whatever is available. And there were these chabadiwalas, people with their small baskets and they would sell. The thing I loved was imli and also bhaturas. But these were, we were given a pocket money of maybe a rupee or 8 annas, and that was sufficient for you to get your whatever you wanted to do. And of course, the nuns were very strict. I don't remember any nun ever smiling. They were very disciplined. I mean, they ensured that you did everything which was right and disciplined. So I remember Sacred Heart with a lot of nostalgia. And I left Sacred Heart somewhere in late 1933, and later on joined Edson College. And then for the next 50 years, I had totally forgotten about Sacred Heart till one of my colleagues at the company I worked at, Packages, her children also went there. And I think she was one of the teachers. So she said, "Do you want to go back to Sacred Heart?" So I said, "I'd love to do that." And so I went back to Sacred Heart. But before I went there, computers had arrived in Lahore. So I told the people who were looking after this computer company that I was associated with, systems, I said, "Can you send a set of computers to Sacred Heart, but don't tell them from whom it is." But when I walked through a Sacred Heart, they took me to the computer lab and they said, "Thank you very much for these computers." They somehow found out. But ever since then, I've been going to Sacred Heart as often as they would want me there, or as often as I'd like to go there, because it brings back memories of 85 years and beyond, which I'm very lucky to look back that time. And the building is still there, so the trees are there, the ambience is there, the smell of the rooms is there. So Sacred Heart has, it's an institution that I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to go there.
So Babar Sahib, listening to you is actually making me very emotional, because when you donated those computers, I was a student there and a computer lab was set up for the first time at Sacred Heart. So this is yet another example of how many waves you have created that you just don't even know about, how many lives you have touched with your association and support of the education sector.
It's given me a lot of satisfaction not to just give donation, but also to interact with the administration there and with the teachers. I remember one day Sister Martin called me up and she said, "I'd like you to come over and inaugurate the exhibition of the knitting and sewing of the girls."
Yes.
So I said, "I'll come over." So I walked around and I was very happy to see these, small sweaters and socks and things like that. And I thought that they wanted me to buy something. So I quietly whispered to Sister Martin and I said, "Can I buy some of these?" She said, no, these will go with the dowry of the girls." So that touched me a lot, that how Sacred Heart was kind of putting these ideas into the minds of their young girl students, that one day you will be, you'll have a family, you'll raise family, and you must know these various skills other than reading, writing, and music. You should know how to knit, how to do,
Embroidery,
cross stitch, and various type of, embroidery and things like that. So that was very, and I must share with you another very interesting story. There was some function of the old girl students there, and I have been very keen that the students of education institutions must give money back to their mother, alma mater. So prior to that, I was at a function, I was a chief guest at Lahore School of Economics. And I told them, I said, there, in order to promote this, I said, "I want to leave a challenge with you, old students and present students, that whatever money you raise for your School of Home Economics, during the next 3 years, I will double it.
Wow.
So, and this was totally unrelated to Sacred Heart. And 3 years later, they sent me a kind of an accounting sheet to say that they had raised 300,000 rupees. And of course, I doubled it, and that was the money that went to. So 3 years later, there was this function at Sacred Heart. And I threw a challenge at the old students, and I said, whatever you raise in the next 12 months for your school, I'll double it. And lo and behold, within a year, Sacred Heart raised almost 900,000 rupees. But that gave me a lot of satisfaction that the students of Sacred Heart were much more loyal to their alma mater than the students at the School of Home Economics. So, and after that, now and then, Sister Martin keeps on calling me up, and I go there, and if there is anything that I can offer or do, I'm always very happy to do that, because it's an institution that is run by people who are totally dedicated. And my latest project for Sacred Heart, which Sister Martin doesn't like, is to put their accounting system into discipline. And I've told them, I said, I will not give you any more money unless I'm satisfied that your accounting is according to, whatever the new disciplines are. And it has to be audited. And you've got to make sure that you're collecting your fees on time. So I heard from some of the teachers that Sister Martin is very lax on collection of fees. If somebody says, Sister, I'm going to pay my fees 2 months later, she said, all right, child. But this kind of thing, some may even get away without paying fees, but an education institution must have proper administration and proper, and these missionaries are not that meticulous about management. So I'm not very popular with her today, but I think I'm doing something which is in the interest of Sacred Heart.
Indeed. Sacred Heart's motto is live for others.
Yes.
And just like you gave the example of embroidery, and the girl children over there would start learning knitting in the 2nd grade. And I think that really helped make the identity of a young school child, that you are more than your looks. Your skill set, what you can create, was very important. So you were at the same institution. Can you reflect back and think about maybe some teachers that were of high impact to you, or maybe your first school friend that you made some friendships over there that you think may have inculcated the spirit of philanthropy, living for others, or any other core values that you hold dear to you even today?
I was too young at that time to even think of these things. But what I do remember is it was a very cosmopolitan and very egalitarian setup there. There were no snooties there who would, if anybody came in a vehicle other than a Tonga, they were dropped outside. Cars were not available. And I remember when my family moved from Rattigan Road to Davis Road, I was still at Kinnaid, and
At Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart, and my whoever was looking after me, could be my father or one of his managers. They got me to use the school bus, so I used to come on a school bus, and then later on we discovered that one of our neighbors on Davis Road was Sheikh Inayatullah, not Sheikh Inayatullah of Anarkali, the general store. This was Sheikh Inayatullah. He was a landlord, and he had a lot of property in Lahore, especially in Neela Gumbaz, and also property in the lane which came off Davis Road. He had townhouses there. He was living in one of the townhouses, and my father had two houses back, on one on Davis Road and one in the lane called. We were number 11. That was number 9. And then we discovered that his daughter and his son were also at Sacred Heart. So sometimes my Tonga would bring them, and most of the time I was riding home in their Tonga, because they were 2 and I was just 1, and they were very kind. They never said they didn't have any room, and they were very, very gracious. So that was, and so I got to know the fellow, their son's name was Zafar, and he was a daredevil. I mean, I remember he used to race down that lane on his Tonga pony to show off to my sisters that he was a good rider. And later on, he, learned to fly, and ultimately joined Pakistan's this thing, locust, whatever organization you have to kill locusts, and you use planes for, spreading pesticide. So he used to do that. And he lived to a ripe age, and he passed away about 10 years ago. But about 7 or 8 years ago, at a function in London, I met his son. And he was a doctor, and I said, "What is your background?" And he said, he comes from Lahore. I said, "Which family?" And he named his father's name. And I said, "Oh, he was my classmate at Sacred Heart." So, and he's a very one of the renowned doctors here in Lahore. I've lost contact with him, but one of my colleagues at Packages was related to him. That's how I kept in touch. So Sacred Heart has not left me. I mean, I still go there as often as possible, and I love to be of service to them. Only about 3 weeks ago, when this virus started, I got a call from Sister Martin, and she said, "We would like to get away for a week. Can you think of some place that we could go and can enjoy it's kind of a getaway?" And fortunately, our paper mill, which is in Kasur, has a good guest house. So I offered them accommodation there. So they were there for a week.
That's lovely.
Sister Martin and 4 of her colleagues from the staff. So these are small things, but I'm very happy that I can be of service to them.
So Babar Sahib, you told us about the milk and biscuit, and very recently you told me that the solution to Pakistan's malnutrition and education problem is if you start giving a boiled egg and potato in schools, that will take care of nutrition, and a hungry child cannot learn in school.
Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you think a good classroom is? What your understanding for an early years, a primary school or an early years child, what makes a healthy classroom?
I think a classroom is something where a child should be looking forward to come, because it provides them an environment which is not available to them at home. But more than the physical furniture and the furnishings, it should be a welcome kind of an environment where the teacher welcomes them, the teacher loves them, the teacher makes much of them, to say that they are wanted. That, I think, is very important. And also, as far as nourishment is concerned, this is a countrywide challenge and disease, because people don't have, especially the bottom half of the country, they don't know what is nourishment or otherwise. You look after the child from the time it's in the womb, and you got to make sure that the mother to be has enough of nourishment so that the child grows up healthy in the womb, and when it's born, she has enough of her mother's milk. There is nothing better in the world that she's able to give to the kid in the quantity that is required. And so that is one of the big tragedies, is that they are not able to breastfeed children. Not that there's a taboo against it, they want to do that, but they don't have the kind of nourishment which provides the ability for them to nurse their child.
Right.
So these are, and then of course, when the child is growing, how to wean them away and to start them on something which is nourishing. They don't have the resources. They can't distinguish what is important. They think so long as the stomach is full, it is enough. That is not enough. It's much better to give them, 1/3 stomach full with the right kind of food, then fill it up with starches and with unnecessary garbage.
Babar Sahib, your transition from an early years student to a middle schooler, from Sacred Heart to Aitchison, must have brought about many changes. One of them being that you went from a co-education space to an all-boys space. Can you talk a bit about what that transition was like?
Yeah, I'll do that. Before I move away from Sacred Heart, I must tell you that Sacred Heart, the amount of effort that they made for their students to have a good handwriting, something which was recognized around the world.
Yes.
And I was told that at the immigration counter in London, the immigration officer looked at this young lady and saw the way she had filled up her immigration form, and he said, "From Sacred Heart, Lahore." That is something that one feels very proud of, that these things stay with you. And since then, I've been very keen to promote good handwriting wherever I've gone. At Aitchison College, I instituted a prize for good handwriting in English and Urdu in the 3 schools, and it's still being there. Then about 30 years ago, I ran an annual competition among schools of Lahore for good handwriting in both, and we reward these kids who have good handwriting so that they can get enough cash reward so they can pay their fees for a whole year. So this is something which, stays with you. And if you have a good handwriting, you're always neat in your appearance. You want cleanliness around you. So handwriting has a very kind of, has a salutary effect on your upbringing beyond your ability to write well.
Absolutely. So
okay, going back to Aitchison College now, this was a big transition and a big step, because coming from Sacred Heart, which was a very egalitarian school, going to Aitchison College, which at that time was the Chief's College, it was reserved for the very few. It was meant for the top echelon of northern India, children of the princely order, the Maharajas, the Nawabs, the feudal lords. So, not that my family belonged to that class, but I was literally smuggled in because of my maternal uncle Mamu. He came from the Fakir Khana, and the Fakirs were in that book. It was called the Chiefs of Punjab book. If you could only be admitted to Aitchison College if your family was in that book. So I sort of claimed that I was not a Fakir, but I was a nephew of a Fakir. And so they were generous enough to take me. And of course, my brother-in-law, Mubarak Ali Shah, married to my eldest sister, he came from a feudal background from Jhang district. He and his whole family had been to Aitchison College. So I used that also as a reason to be admitted. But once I got admitted, it was totally another environment. People were coming in cars. I remember Maharaja Patiala's children, boys coming in Rolls Royce. They used to live in Patiala House, which is opposite Government House. It's a place the house was called Bishop's Stowe. And it was only about 5 minutes drive, but they came in a Rolls Royce, and they had a guardian by the name of Tyrant. He was an Australian. He was their guardian. He used to bring them there and take them home for lunch and bring them back. So here at Aitchison College, it was another ball game altogether. We were, games were as important as the classroom, and we had teachers I was 84th boy on that payroll, on the rolls of this college. And so there were 12 to 15 boys per class, and there were only about eight, 9 classes in the whole school. So I came into Form 1. And I remember we were taught English, of course, maths, we were taught general science, Urdu, and I didn't even know ABC of Alpha Bay of Urdu. So they used to give dictation, which I used to write in Roman English. And I remember the only time in my life when I failed an examination was in the Urdu paper. And I came home howling and crying. And my father said, can we do anything about it? I said, no, I failed. And then my mother, who was very much interested in Urdu and Persian, in the summer, we used to go to the hills, and she made sure that we had a tutor who was very proficient in Urdu and Persian, and especially Urdu poetry. So he would go with us, and for 3 months, we learned Urdu, not as a punishment, but as something which we enjoyed. And she encouraged, my sisters were already proficient in Urdu. So we used to have, in the evenings, we used to have bathbazi amongst us, which meant that you recited a couplet and they have to start with the couplet ending with the letter on which it finished. So that was something that she encouraged us to do this. So these were ways that my mother encouraged us to learn Urdu. Then there was a relative of hers who needed some help, and she was very good in giving names to people. He was rather dark in complexion, so she said, I'm going to ask him to come and teach you to write takhti. And she used to call him Kali Suljana. So he used to come and told, I was taught to write takhti. This was way in addition to whatever I did at H.N. College. But H.N. College was another world altogether.
So what do you recommend? A co-education for young kids, or an all girls, all boys?
No, I think co-education is very important, because then they respect a person of the other gender. And of course, we have large families, especially among the poor. So they must know how to deal with their sisters, and the sisters to deal with their brothers. And we've taken you to the school that I've sponsored in the village that I'm looking after. There, these play groups are all, mixed gender. And hopefully one day we can have co-education even at the school level. But today I think the government has restricted that.
So Babar Sahib, you just described what a good classroom for a young child should look like. Can you describe your childhood in some emotions? Like, what did you feel growing up as a child, whether a school child or at home?
I arrived after 4 daughters. So I thought I was my mother's favorite till my younger sister arrived. She got more attention than I did, but there was never any rivalry. She got a person to look after me from the age of 5. The family used to have business in Delhi. She used to go to Delhi. So she saw a young man there who was maybe in his 20s, spoke well, good manners, and she hired him as my kind of somebody who would take care of me, who would bathe me, clothe me, make my hair and all that kind of thing. This is before I went to H.N. College. His name was Muhammadin. I reconnected with him after partition. He came to Karachi and came to see us and all that kind of thing. And we gave him a job and all that. So she made sure that I had the right kind of environment and company. And she was very keen when I joined Edson College. You know, she wanted to know who my classmates were. And having been in Lahore, having lived in Lahore, and she knew people, you know, in the society at that time. She knew their mothers, their fathers. And she said, "Iske ghar tum ja sakte ho. You can go to the house of this friend of yours. You can't go to that person's house. Or that boy is not welcome to our house." So she was very keen that, and this is from the age of 8, keeping an eye on me as to what kind of friends I was mixing, sort of interacting with. 90% of my friends were non-Muslims. Because I think she knew more about the Muslim families than she did about the non-Muslim families. So she knew all the black sheep in the Muslim families, and she said, and she was a great believer that if there was somebody, if somebody's grandfather had done something wrong, that grandson was not to be of your son's friend.
Wow.
She was very sort of particular about those things.
And from the age of 8 years old.
Yeah. And it carried out right through till I went to Edson College, government college, and my friends, you know, were Sikhs and Hindus. They used to come to the house. So she was in parda, but there was no parda for my friends. She always sort of welcomed them. And, you know, even after partition, this relationship continued. In fact, my best friend was Harcharan Singh Barar, who died about 10 years ago. He used to come here. We used to visit them, and while she was alive, you know, he would come and stay with us, with his wife, with his children. So she adopted them, and now I find that, you know, unfortunately he passed away. His wife passed away. His eldest son passed away. His only son passed away. His daughter is the only survivor, and he has grandchildren from his son. The daughter got married, but she, you know, got separated, and she's all by herself. She is closer to our family than to any of her relatives in India. She keeps on coming here whenever she can, and she rings us up once a week to find out how we are, and we are in touch with her, and, you know, so that kind of a relationship. And it all goes back to my mother. She insisted that it's much better to have few friends but know them well, rather than know 20 people and not be friendly with anybody. You know, she was very meticulous about that.
And I'm sure those very select friends that your mother carefully curated for you had a profound impact in how you developed as a person also.
Yeah,
what values?
And also vice versa. How one was able to, you know, influence their thinking and their kind of attitude. And so it was a two-way traffic. It's not only one way that I gained a lot, but I'm sure that they also benefited from this relationship.
So Babar sir, what advice would you give to parents who are particularly parents of school-going children, given how you describe your life and as a school-going child and your relationship with your mother? What advice do you have for parents of today?
Well, one is that give more time to your kids, to the parents. And the kids should also be very selective in making friends. I keep on going back to Edson College, my old school, where I talked to the boys and to the staff. You know, when I was at Edson, as I mentioned, I was only 84, and we had maybe 25 people, what we call teachers at those times. They were known as masters. They were not selected by the administration at Edson for being academics. They were selected of being good tutors. How to bring up these youngsters who would have the right kind of manners. And I keep on stressing on the current teachers and staff at Edson College that, you know, get the kids out of this grade mentality of having marks. They should be good human beings. They should have good marks. They should not cheat. They should not tell lies. They should not be jealous. Those are things which I make a much better human being. I mean, my mother, I can't thank her enough. One of the things that she, you know, explained to me from the very beginning, because my my cousin, who was the only son of his parents, and we were a large brood, he had many more toys than I had, but she said, you should be happy to see his toys. Don't be don't be envious, and be satisfied what you have. And it stayed with me all my life. Even today, people come and tell me, you've done very well in business, but you are number 10. I said, I don't care. I want to be number 100. That is not important. I want to be known as somebody who ran a good business rather than a big business.
That's a very nice way of
No, this is something
it.
that goes back to my mother's upbringing.
So, Babar Sahib, you've shared two almost contrasting things about your childhood. You said when you transitioned from a very egalitarian Sacred Heart early years school to your middle school, HSN College, there was a big difference. Where at HSN College, it was Chiefs College, where there was no qualms about showing one's wealth and status in society. At the same time, at home, your mother was very careful about selecting the kinds of friends and company that you would have. So, in today's world, in the city we live in fact, around the world, materialism has become a big phenomenon that parents have to deal with. What advice do you have for those parents who have to raise their children in schools and in societies where status symbols and showing off of one's wealth has become somewhat acceptable, whereas parents want to keep their children grounded, to respect merit in a person rather than their wealth? What advice do you have for those parents?
Well, the parents have to set the example themselves. If the mother is all decked up in diamonds and she wants her son, to be simply dressed, that's not on. She has to, demonstrate that these outward kind of things that show off your wealth and your grandeur. Those are very kind of temporary, and those are things that are not lasting. This virus that has locked us up for the last 4 months, I think it's going to have a very profound effect on people's think. Not long ago, a friend of mine called me up and he said, my wife is complaining that all the jewelry I have and all the silk dresses I have, that I don't have anybody to show it off. Well, I said, she shouldn't have those in the first instance. But anyway, in the olden days, the nobility had to dress up because they had to make up for their superiority in rank with the general masses. But if you want to be one of the people of a country, then to show off yourself, with extra plumes in your cap, it doesn't get you more. It doesn't get you more respect.
Babar Sahib, you've spoken so fondly about your relationship with your mother and the very critical role she had in your life. Can you talk about the role of your father, and also with regards to your early education, if your father had any role in that?
Yeah, no, my father, he gave us as much love as any father could give. But as his business was taking him all over the country. All over the country, I mean, from Peshawar to Cape Comorin, and from Karachi to Rangoon. So he was, I've seen his diary. I mean, he was forever on the train. I think he must have put millions of miles of railway travel during his lifetime, because he and my uncle were the two owners of this business. And my uncle was more stationary. My father was the younger brother, so he had to do all the legwork. But my uncle managed the head office, and the major kind of decisions he took along with my father. but they distributed the business among themselves, I mean, responsibility in a very, very harmonious way. There was never any argument between them. They were both equal partners. So, I mean, we got all the love. He was very pleased. He was not here when I joined Edson College. He was very, very happy that I'd got in. My brothers were not that enthusiastic because they couldn't make it to Edson College. So, but they recognized that this was something which brought the family into another, at another level. Because to send your son to Edson College, you became a member of an elitist club. So that was never a source of rancor amongst anybody. And then, of course, all the other boys in the family came to Edson College. My sisters went to Queen Mary College, which was the equivalent of Edson College at that time. So it was a very harmonious, loving environment. No tension. Even though, I mean, when my brothers got married, their wives totally sort of assimilated themselves in our family. They were not outsiders. They were in the larger family, Being Sayyids and Shias, we married within the clan.
So, Babar Sahab, you just said that you saw your father's diary and you saw so much hard work, the kind of work ethic that you saw in your father, even when he was not physically present. How has that transferred into your own life and your own work ethic?
Because he, whenever he had time to spend with me, he would take me to the office himself. I mean, I remember we had, his business was contracting with being contractors to the British regiments. So in the summer, I remember there was a regiment that was based in Murray, in a place called Kuldanna. That was a cantonment of the British, and there's a place called Ghadial, also a suburb of Murray. And he had canteens there. And whenever he went, "Baitho beta, motor mein mere saath chalo," he would take me there. So he felt that a young boy, no matter what age was, should not be just sitting idle. He should be kept busy. And during our vacations from Edson College, we had 3 main holidays. We had Christmas, Easter, and summer. In Christmas, he would send us to Bombay, to Lucknow, to Calcutta, wherever, the regiment was and we wanted to go. And in the Easter, the same way. And in summer, we would go to Srinagar or to Murray. And in Srinagar, of course, there was no business there, but my mother made sure that we had a tutor along who had nothing to do with our school teaching, but would expose us to Urdu, Persian, Arabic. So this was, the whole idea was to make sure that we were exposed to things which made us different from others. And the reason was, I think my mother, she was self-educated. She never, in those days, she was married in 1904. She was born in 1887. And when she was growing up, her father was educated. I don't know what level. I think in those days even matriculation was a high enough education to be employed in government. He joined the civil service, and he then joined the elitist service called the political service, where you were working working on behalf of the British government with the local princes. He was a resident in Tonk. Tonk is a state in Rajasthan. And then he was envoy of the British government, Indian government, to Kabul. He was there for 3 years. So, but he made sure that his daughters were well educated at home. He had the right kind of Maulvis coming to teach them Urdu, Persian, Arabic. Not so much of that, but Urdu and Persian, and also their writing. My mother had a beautiful handwriting. So did her sisters. So they were brought up that way, and he didn't have a son in the beginning. I mean, it is a very interesting story that the 3 daughters who grew up and got married, they were very keen to have a brother, and they then prevailed upon their father to marry again, to have a son. And luckily, he had a son, the first child, the only child he had was a son. They went and got him married to a family that belonged to the outskirts of the Mughal family in Delhi. And he had a son. And my grandfather died at a very early age. He was in his late 40s. He passed away and left this 3-year-old son. And they renounced all their legacy, all their inheritance in favor of their stepbrother. They said, he must get everything, that he has to be the torchbearer of their father. I don't know of any sisters who would do that. And they went and the 3 women went in a burqa to the government house to seek an audience with the governor, to tell them that, of course the brother went to Hson College. That's how I was smuggled in, because he was my mamu. And I lived not to a ripe age. He died still in his late 50s. He died of cancer of the brain. And his grandson is here. So my mother and her sisters were remarkable in that. And from there I found out that she was never interested in any accumulation of things. She used to use the expression कि ये जेवर के पीछे औरतें क्यों मरती है, इसने किसी का साथ दिया है? This jewelry which women, are so much attracted to, has it ever been faithful to anybody? So that is why I cherish the memory of my mother and my father. I mean, the first main building that I sponsored at Hson College was the sports center, which is named after my father. And then, of course, the School of Education is named after my uncle and my father. So, I mean, I hope I can pay enough homage to their memory in an unbiased manner to my parents.
Babar Sahib, you tell a story about how your father, I believe, used to teach concepts of fairness, with the story of a hen that belonged to your mother, I believe, that went into the stable of the horses. And
yes. This was my grandfather. My mother, it was my khala. She had a small pen of chicken. And of course, in those days, chicken used to roam all over the place. So this poor hen walked into the stable of my father's horses. The stable is where the Naqsh building is on the main street at Bazar Hakima. These were stables of my father. And of course, the horse kicked and the hen's, leg broke. So my khala wrote a letter to my grandfather, who used to live just across the street. The Mardana was separate, that I want damages for. So my grandfather wrote a couplet of Sadi, that if you try and grab the hand of somebody stronger than you, and if you break your hand, nobody else to be blamed except yourself. So that is how he rebutted his own daughter by a couplet from Sadi.
Such a beautiful education.
Yeah. He treated his daughters like grown-up sons.
That's a very beautiful line, treating your daughters like grown-up sons.
Yeah.
Babar Sahib, unfortunately, the way the world is going now, there are a lot of broken marriages, and there are a lot of young people who are choosing to raise their children as single parents, because they find that staying in an unhealthy marriage is perhaps worse for their children than raising them separately. What advice do you have for those parents who are figuring this out for the first time? They have to bear the burden of being the mother and the father. And how can they be better parents for those children?
Well, it's something that I cannot give any advice on, because luckily I've not faced that situation either directly or indirectly in the family or otherwise. But my advice would be that don't overindulge and don't be overprotective of your child. Let the child grow up normally, and don't nanny the child too much. If it's a boy, should be able to stand on his feet as soon as he's 14 or 15. Give him all the respect, and give him room to develop. And of course, don't be shy of telling him what you think is right, and make sure that he has the right kind of friends. I think that is very important. And of course, single mothers can get together and form a kind of a consortium to bring up their children in a larger group rather than in isolation.
Yes. And advice for single parents raising daughters?
Same. Daughters, of course, are more difficult because I think they want freedom much earlier than the boys do. And their freedom, of course, is much more hazardous. So they have to be very, and of course, and also by example, that they should interact with girls who have the same value system, and the mothers have the same value system. The more important thing is the mothers of the girls rather than the girls themselves.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Babar Sahib. I'm so indebted.
Well, I hope it's worked all right.
It's perfect.
So your family was actually very closely associated with Quaid-e-Azam.
Particularly Syed Wajidli. Syed Amjadi was the opposite.
Did you find anyone interested in the future of this country?
I think Bhutto was it to start with. He wanted to immortalize himself